and like it's not much, but it's just like there's a footnote that like as things escalate and go further into the future, there's a point where like a documentary, like a movie, is made about that character, and the director is shocked and aghast at the idea that the audience that ended up loving his movie were not getting his sarcastic and obvious framing of the absurdity of this guy's beliefs, and they were actually looking at it as a reinforcing, awesome dude that was full of truth. And when he got incoherent towards the end of his life, it's because he was spitting so much truth that his own brain couldn't handle it. What a fucking noble hero, this guy was, this insane child molesting fascist, and it's like, oh no, but I thought it would be obvious with my directing style and commentary. Why didn't they? No, what do you mean? No, he's not supposed to be based, guys. Stop calling him based. And you're just like, this is brutal.
I feel like Breaking Bad is like a very pop culture example of like, you can't write a charismatic piece of shit because people will just gravitate towards them and be like, yeah, man, fucking Skylar trying to stop him from selling drugs and killing people? What the fuck?
Dude, like, it's almost as if that moment could have had a prompt in the corner going, would you like to know more? It is Starship Troopers, absolutely happening, and that's like one of the side notes.
I will never cease to be amazed by the ability of certain people to present ideas that make so much sense and then completely fumble the bag and then just drop the ball just as you're about to cross the finish line. So today, on the day that I'm recording this, the 12th of February, two best friends are recording one of their podcasts, or should I say super best friends play. From what I understand, one of them became super woke because of his woke wife and they broke up, whatever. And now we only have Pat and Wooly. And Wooly presents the novel of Disco Elysium. You know Disco Elysium. It's that game made by a bunch of communists.
All right. And the game award goes to Disco Elysium.
Disco Elysium also wins Best Independent Game. Tonight, they're taking home a total of 4 game awards.
So, we'd like to thank all the great people that came before us.
Ilya Repin, Vladimir Mayakovsky, Viktor Tsoi,
and Marx and Engels for providing us the political education. Thank you.
So he talks about the sequel of the game, but the sequel is a book. So he talks about how there's a character in the book that presents and represents the idea of nihilism. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. The ultimate idea is if people don't want to accept communism, so just why even bother? Let's just destroy the world. Which is actually what communists actually do in real life. We'll just try it until communism works out. But the thing is that even that doesn't make sense. Because people don't go, while communism didn't work, let's destroy the world. The world gets destroyed because they keep trying to push communism and they don't understand that by nature, communism doesn't work and just ends up in a complete disaster every time. And then he mentions that one of the characters is, well, we're on YouTube and I have to censor myself, but I don't know what euphemism to use. Let's just say he's from that, the character is from that party that was totally in vogue in Germany during the 40s. And that character is, let's just use one of their own terms. That character is also a map. And in the story, people read, within the context of the book, there are people who read what he writes and think that he's totally based. And then him and Pat, well, the co-host was being more discreet, but He probably agrees. This is a Californian. The co-hosts just go tits up while Pat and Wooly do, because oh my fucking god, like, oh, that's totally what happens in real life. That's totally what happened, Pat says, with things like Breaking Bad. How dare you stop Walter White from trying to sell drugs? But the thing is that's where they fumbled the bag. That's not the same thing. Walter White, you sympathize with Walter White because at the start he was simply a man just trying to cure himself of a horrible disease, and the way his country works makes it so that in the USA you have amazing healthcare, but do you have the money to afford that healthcare? I know people like the idea of free healthcare, but like anything that's free, the free healthcare is, if you actually do research, you'll notice that countries that have free healthcare have terrible service and long waiting times. Yeah, in America now you're broke, but at least you're alive. While in any other country, like, well, Canada, for example, no, you're not doing great. Yeah. The thing is that, yeah, it happens in real life, even with a certain Austrian painter that, and I'm not gonna dive into that, but it happens that people may not agree with everything that he was pushing. Some of the things that he said were sensical. We may not agree with Austrian painter, but if he says things like you should exercise, well, yeah, Austrian painter liked dogs and didn't like people who smoked, and he really fought hard for animal rights. And I know a lot of people like your dogs, so are you part of his regime now because you have things in common? I think that's what Kanye West was trying to say, but Kanye West is he writes music well, but in actual conversations he's not eloquent, and he's easily taken out of context, and he's highly memeable. I like to call that the ShortFatOtaku syndrome. ShortFatOtaku was on the Side Scroller podcast recently and talked about Gamergate, and immediately everything that he said was more or less a lie, or he was trying so hard to reconcile his lefty mindset that he immediately contradicts himself.
So from your perspective, what was Gamergate, Dev?
So even though I was on the journalistic side, and I still am, I think if we're going to talk realistically, it was probably a bit of both, because I also remember seeing definitely some bad apples who were actually harassing women, right?
Sure.
And in fact, when last time I was on Side Scrollers, I had recently talked to Brianna Wu, who hated me during Gamergate, but we built a bridge and patched things up. I was on Wick TV's channel. We had like a let's talk about this 9 years later, right?
Yes.
And so she was on the anti-Gamergate side, and I was on the pro-Gamergate side. And we had an opportunity to like describe our positions to each other, right? And there was definitely some harassment. So it's people who say that there wasn't, I think they're just coping. There definitely was some.
Right.
But there was also a real point to it as well, because you had the reason that Five Guys Burgers and Fries became a meme is because you had the indie game developer Zoe Quinn, who was making games and having articles published about her. Her games are being covered. She was going to like certain events and being covered positively by various game journalists, but she was having sex with these journalists. And the reason this came out is because her ex-boyfriend published an account of the 6 months while they were dating, where she had sex with the five guys who were five journalists, cheating on him doing so, right? And that was her way of basically making connections in like the indie game development and the game journalist scene. She was having sex with these guys.
My point is that it is true that people will sometimes agree with controversial figures, but nobody puts themselves on the side of minor attracted people. The only people who do are people who are themselves crazy far left, or people who have been indoctrinated since youth. And what I disliked about the Super Fans cast was that they were trying to lump in people who had nothing to do with that, or yes, they would do something like that, but there's quite a difference between siding with someone like Walter White and siding with someone who's a map and on the side of the Austrian painter. And even that doesn't make sense. You know, it's like Vosh recently got caught. Vosh, you know, accuses people who like anime. He says that, you know, they're the N-word, you know, that N-word, and that they're attracted to minors, when those two are generally mutually exclusive. And actually, it's people like him that are like that. You know, it's these people that are supposed to be on your side, but then just project or assign to you things that you don't actually say or do. People don't look at someone like Vosh, for example, and say, oh, he wants to lower the age of consent, he's so base. No, everyone calls him out and hates him. Nobody would say that, and the people who would say that are not the people that you are criticizing, or the people that are being criticized within the work, or the work within the work in the case of that book. Going back to ShortFatOtaku, the problem with him is that he makes a lot of sense, but he always has to double back and try to reconcile everything that he knows through the lens of the left media. And so what happens with Two Best Friend, the ShortFatOtaku effect, is that, yeah, they're going to say things that make sense and you agree with them, but it's always some kind of counter. You know, count down until they say something stupid or something that's completely hypocritical, and that you just, it's something where you have to take a shot, you have to take a drink, because it doesn't make sense what you said. Nobody says that, nobody is like that. You've just contradicted yourself. ShortFatOtaku was talking about Gamergate, and now, no, actually, people were hating on women. No, people were hating on Zoe Quinn, and she happened to be a woman. So that's why they called her a bitch or names like that. They didn't just go, oh, a woman, to hell with her. No. Oh, a woman who used her sex appeal to get good reviews for a shitty game. That's why people called her out. But if you ask the people, what is Gamergate? They'll just say things like, oh, it's interesting, you should look it up. No, but what is it though? Oh, it's complicated. They'll never say it because they don't know, or they know that if they start explaining it, that it's bullshit. They know that deep down you're not on their side. And if you actually give them the truth as it is, well, you're just gonna call them out on that. So you just have to just tell them that it's interesting, or that, oh, there's a bunch of bigots. You have to, you can't tell the truth. You have to rein them in ideologically and hope that they're not smart enough to realize that they've been lied to, or just lie to them and hope that they just don't make the research. Because if you just tell them straight up, then you know they can tell when you're not on their side, or sometimes they just don't want to take the risk. I don't watch Super Best Friend very often anymore, but I tune in once in a while, and every time it's just a matter of time before they just say something that is so wild that I just can't agree anymore, and I have to turn off the podcast for a while and just do something else, or come back when they're just started making sense again. It's sad. And the thing is that while Matt may have been, while he wasn't an SJW, but one of his old co-hosts, Liam, and his wife were. If you go on, for a while I was actually wondering what happened with him and why he stopped being friends with Pat. But if you look up on their Twitter, you can see that, okay, they're Liam is a game developer now, and he has his pronouns in his bio. It's easy to put one and one together. And Pat is a really abrasive personality, and it doesn't matter if you're left or right. He's going to say dumb shit, and he's going to double down on it. And while someone who's libertarian or right might just go, who gives a fuck, someone who's left-leaning or is associated with left-leaning people will not let it slide. And that's why they eventually broke up. The problem now is that, like Matt, Pat and Wooly are just consuming media and are just letting these people tell them what to think and are just accepting their narratives. I was listening to another podcast, the Whiskey Capitalist podcast, and Drexel was on from Rakita Law and MGTOW fame, and he said it pretty well. Right-wing people don't have wins because everything that's being won is being won by the left. I don't remember who said that. The right are actually trying to win elections, while the left are making sure that, you know, they're controlling the television, the journalists, the video game, so that they don't win an election, they just took over your mind. So the left is just constantly getting into the minds of people, and at some point you kind of realize that they may not say that they are, but a lot of people around you are left-leaning people because they've been repeated those lies so often, and they believe them and repeat them, and eventually they might as well be on the left. They might as well be a ShortFatOtaku, and no matter how much they say, "Oh, I used to be left, but I've stopped," you don't stop. You know, there's an event horizon like a black hole, and once you've crossed that threshold, you don't go back to being normal if you were normal in the first place.